Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Hey, here we go. We made it. The end of the Abraham Lincoln saga, story, legend, whatever you want to call it. Either or, we're going to call it the end because we have arrived at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. We're going to lead, obviously you guys know what already happened. And if you listen to the last episode, we covered his presidency, basically all throughout the end of the war, his re-election, and the kind of the lead up to this. We're not going to get into John Wilkes Booth, a lot of his early story, obviously, because it'll be way too long of an episode. So we'll kind of just go into the lead up, the situation, the atmosphere after kind of the war's over now, and what led up for old Johnny Wilkes to decide this. Then we'll take a look at some conspirators in this.
Because there's always some of those.
And one of the only women hanged in this time of the nation in front of everybody. So we'll have all that on the assassination. We all know, shot by John Wilkes Booth while attending the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater, April 14th, 1865. Lincoln, he died of his wounds the following day, 7:22 a.m. in the Peterson House, which was across the street from the theater. He obviously was the first U.S. president to be assassinated, which is crazy. The first three presidents to ever be assassinated all happened within 50 before 1800 or 1900, and then nothing until JFK. John Wilkes Booth, he was born in Maryland into a family of prominent stage actors. He had, by the time of this assassination, became a famous actor and national celebrity in his own right. He was also an outspoken Confederate sympathizer. In late 1860, he was initiated in the pro-Confederate Knights of the Golden Circle in Baltimore, Maryland.
In May of 1863, Confederate States Congress passed a law prohibiting the exchange of black soldiers, following a previous decree by President Jefferson Davis in December of 1862, that neither black soldiers nor their white officers would be exchanged.
Damn.
This became a reality in mid-July 1863, after some soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts were not exchanged following their assault on Fort Wagner, which they got their asses handed to them. Oh, poor guy. July 30th, 1863, President Abe Lincoln, he issued General Order number 252. That was to stop prisoner exchanges with the South until all Northern soldiers would be exchanged without regard for their skin color.
He said, you don't want to do it all, then you ain't getting none of your guys back either. And trust me, we're taking way more than yours.
Right.
Stopping the prisoner exchanges is often wrongly attributed to General Grant, even though he was commanding an army in the West in mid-1863 and obviously became overall commander in early 64. Booth, he then conceived a plan to kidnap Lincoln in order to blackmail the Union into resuming prisoner exchanges, and he recruited Samuel Arnold, George Atzerodt, David Harold, Michael O'Laughlin, Lewis Powell, also known as Lewis Payne, and John Surratt to help him. Surratt's mother, Mary, left her tavern in Surrattsville, Maryland, and moved to a house in Washington, D.C., where Booth became a frequent visitor.
Booth and Lincoln, not personally acquainted, but Lincoln had seen Booth at Ford's Theater in 1863. After the assassination, actor Frank Mordaunt, he wrote that Lincoln, who was apparently harbored no suspicions about Booth, he admired the actor and had repeatedly but unsuccessfully invited him to the White House. Booth attended Lincoln's second inauguration on 4th of March, 1865, writing in his diary afterwards, "What an excellent chance I had, if I wished, to kill the president on Inauguration Day." Wow.
All right, well, criminal, just write down your crime. Or thinking about crime.
Right.
March 17th, Booth and the other conspirators planned to abduct Lincoln as he returned from a play at Campbell General Hospital in Northwest Washington. Lincoln did not go to the play, however, instead attending a ceremony at the National Hotel. Booth, who was living at the National Hotel at the time, and had he not gone to the hospital for the abortive kidnap attempt, might have been able to attack Lincoln at the hotel. Right. Well, meanwhile, the Confederacy was collapsing. April 3rd, Richmond, the Confederate capital, fell to the Union Army.
Yeah, it's pretty much all but done. 9th April, Robert E. Lee, as we all know, he surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Confederate President Jefferson Davis and other Confederate officials, they fled. Nevertheless, Booth continued to believe in the old rebel cause and saw a way to salvage it. He soon decided, you know what? Let's kill this lanky son of a bitch.
What would that have done?
Right. There are various theories about Booth's motivations. In a letter to his mother, he wrote of his desire to avenge the South.
I mean, I could see that.
Right.
I couldn't see a reason he believed that killing Lincoln would revive the South and make them,
Never happened.
Right. Well, Doris Kearns Goodwin has endorsed the idea. Another factor may have been Booth's rivalry with his well-known older brother, actor.
Maybe he did think that because the vice president was a war Democrat.
All through the war, supported the Union.
It's true.
There's another idea out there that Booth's rivalry with his well-known older brother, actor Edwin Booth, who was a loyal Unionist. Oh, so you want to get back at his older brother.
Oh.
Some historians disagree with this cause, saying that he actually admired the daring exploits of abolitionist John Brown.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Booth's sister, Asia Booth Clark, quoted him as saying, John Brown was a man inspired, the grandest character of the century.
Okay. Maybe he just liked that he stood up for what he believed in, right?
Maybe.
April 11th, Booth attended Lincoln's last speech, in which Lincoln promoted voting rights for emancipated slaves. Booth said, "That means N-word citizenship. That is the last speech he will ever give." Enraged, Booth urged Powell to shoot Lincoln on that very spot. Whether Booth made his request because he was not armed or considered Powell a better shot than himself, we have no idea. In any event, Powell refused for fear of the crowd, and Booth was either unable or unwilling to personally attempt to kill the president at that time. However, old John Wilkes, he said to David Harold, "By God, I'll put him through."
Uh-oh. According to Ward Hill Lamont, 3 days before his death, Lincoln related a dream, like we said in the first episode, I believe, in which he wandered the White House searching for the source of mournful sounds.
Wow.
He said, "I kept on until I arrived at the East Room, which I entered. There I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a catafalque on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments.
Wow.
Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards, and there was a throng of people, gazing mournfully upon the corpse, whose face was covered, others weeping pitifully. 'Who is dead in the White House?' I demanded one of the soldiers. 'The president,' was his answer. 'He was killed by an assassin.'"
Damn. Can you imagine that, dude?
That's crazy.
However, Lincoln later told Lamon that in this dream it was not me, but some other fellow that was killed. Seems that this ghostly assassin tried his hand on someone else. For months, Lincoln had looked pale and haggard, but on the morning of assassination, he told people how happy he was. First Lady Mary Lincoln, she felt that such talk could bring bad luck.
Well, because she's already a
Right.
freaking depressed shell of herself right now, mourning her kid.
"Don't you smile over here, Abe." Lincoln told his cabinet that he had dreamed of being on a singular and indescribable vessel that was moving with great rapidity toward a dark and indefinite shore, and that he had the same dream before nearly every great and important event of the war, such as Union victories at Antietam, Murfreesboro, and Gettysburg, and Vicksburg. Oh, so he thought, this is a good thing. I've had this dream before, and good things happen.
Every time something good.
All right.
Besides, the thousands of men dying. But April 14th, Booth's mourning started at midnight.
Okay.
He wrote his mother that all was well, but he was in haste. In his diary, he wrote that our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done.
All right.
While visiting Ford's Theater around noon to pick up his mail, Booth learned that Lincoln and Grant were to visit the theater that evening for a performance of Our American Cousin. This provided him with an especially good opportunity to attack Lincoln, since having performed there several times, he knew the theater's layout and was familiar to its staff.
Right. So
why, they wouldn't question why he's there.
Not at all. Booth went to Mary Surratt's boarding house in Washington, D.C., and asked her to deliver a package to her tavern in Surrattsville, Maryland. He also asked her to tell her tenant, Louis Weichman, to ready the guns and have that ammo ready that Booth had previously stored at the tavern.
Uh-oh.
The conspirators met for the final time at 8:45 p.m. Booth assigned Powell to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward at his home. Atzerodt to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at Kirkwood Hotel. And he told Harold to guide Powell, who was unfamiliar with Washington, to Seward's house and then to rendezvous with Booth in Maryland. Uh-oh. Yeah. Damn, they're just going after everybody. I'm surprised they're killing Andrew Johnson, I guess.
Booth was the only well-known member of the conspiracy, clearly. Access to the theater's upper floor containing the presidential box was restricted, which it should be, and Booth was the only plotter who could have realistically expected to be admitted there without difficulty.
Right.
Furthermore, it would have been reasonable but ultimately incorrect for the plotters to have assumed that the entrance of the box would be guarded. Right, yeah, didn't even have guards.
Right. And plus, if anybody were to ask him, like, dude, Abe's been begging me to come to the White House. I bet if you ask him to let me come in there.
Well, I'm sure it's just not a straight shot up into that thing. It's probably a hallway with several booths.
Right. And with John's.
Well, had it been guarded, Booth would have been the only plotter with a plausible chance of gaining access to the president,
Right.
or at least to gain entry to the box without being searched for weapons first. Booth planned to shoot Lincoln at point-blank range with a single-shot Philadelphia Derringer pistol and then stab Grant at the theater.
Damn.
They were all to strike simultaneously shortly after 10 o'clock. Adsarat, he tried to withdraw from the plot, which to this point had involved only kidnapping, not murder, but Booth pressured him to continue.
Ooh.
And then he gets drunk.
Despite what Booth had heard earlier in the day, General Grant and his wife, Julia, had declined to accompany the Lincolns, as Mary Lincoln and Julia Grant were not on good terms. She's like, dude, my wife think your wife's fucking nuts.
Right.
I'm sorry,
And
Mr. President, but...
the one time wife spats actually turned out good for one party anyways.
All right. Others in succession also declined Lincoln's invitation until finally Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris, daughter of United States Senator Ira Harris of New York, they're like, we'll go. William H. Crook, one of Lincoln's bodyguards, advised him, like, please, Abe, don't go. But Lincoln said he had promised his wife.
Oh, geez.
Lincoln told Speaker of the House, Schuyler Colfax, I suppose it's time to go, though I would rather stay, before assisting Mary into the carriage.
Jeez.
Damn, everything just saying, point to that thing, just don't go. And
Listen to your gut, man. Listen to your heart. The presidential party arrived late and settled into their box, made from two adjoining boxes with the divide and partition removed.
Okay.
The play was interrupted, and the orchestra played Hail to the Chief as the full house of about 1,700 rose in applause.
Fantastic.
Lincoln sat in a rocking chair that had been selected for him from among the Ford family's personal furnishings.
It's fucking great. Look at this guy.
I've seen that rocking chair in person, by the way.
Crazy. The cast modified a line of the play in honor of Lincoln. When the heroine asked for a seat protected from the draft, the reply scripted as, well, you're not the only one that wants to escape the draft. That was delivered instead as, the draft has already been stopped by order of the president. A member of the audience observed that Mary Lincoln often called her husband's attention to aspects of the action on stage and seemed to take a great pleasure in witnessing his enjoyment.
Like a
Sitting
little-
there. She ain't even looking at the stage. She's looking at old Abe, just smiling away,
Looking at
out the little
kid.
boys' booties.
At one point, Mary whispered to Lincoln, who was holding her hand, "What will Miss Harris think of my hanging on to you so?"
Oh.
Lincoln replied, "She won't think anything about it."
Why would she?
Because you're not supposed to
Right,
do public
right.
display of affection. In the following years, these words were traditionally considered Lincoln's last, though N.W. Minor, a family friend, claimed in 1882 that Mary Lincoln told him that Lincoln's last words expressed a wish to visit Jerusalem.
Oh. Lincoln's usual protections were not in place this very night. Crook, he was on a second shift at the White House. And Ward Hill Layman, Lincoln's personal bodyguard, he was in Richmond on assignment from Lincoln. John Frederick Parker, he was assigned to guard the presidential box. Intermission. He went to a nearby tavern along with Lincoln's valet, Charles Forbes, and coachman Francis Burke. We're just going to go get a drink right quick. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Booth had several drinks while waiting for his planned time. It is unclear whether Parker returned to the theater, but he was certainly not at his post when Booth entered the box. Damn.
In any event, there's no certainty that the entry would have been denied to a celebrity such as Booth.
Right, as we always said.
Booth had prepared a brace to bar the door after entering the box, indicating that he expected a guard. After spending time at the tavern, Booth entered Ford's Theater one last time at about 10:10 p.m., this time through the theater's front entrance. He passed through the dress circle and went to the door that led to the presidential box after showing Charles Forbes his calling card. And come on through, buddy.
Navy surgeon George Brainerd Todd saw Booth arrive. About 10:25 p.m., a man came in, walked slowly along the side on which the president box was, and I heard a man say, "There's Booth." And I turned my head to look at him. He was still walking very slow and was near the box door when he stopped. He took a card from his pocket, wrote something on it, and gave it to the usher who took it to the box. In a minute, the door was open, and he walked in. I bet he took that card to Lincoln.
Might have, right? Said, John Wilkes Booth wishes to see you or something.
Abe's like, no shit.
About time. Once inside the hallway, Booth barricaded the door by wedging a stick between it and the wall. From here, a second door led to Lincoln's box. Evidence shows that earlier in the day, Booth had bored a peephole in this second door.
Wow.
Nobody noticed. Booth knew the play Our American Cousin and waited to time his shot at about 10:15 p.m. with the laughter at one of the hilarious lines of the play delivered by actor Harry Hawk. It goes, Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal, you shocked-alizing old man tramp. Right. Lincoln was laughing at this line when Booth opened the door, stepped forward, and shot him from behind with his pistol.
At least he was laughing.
I guess.
The bullet entered Lincoln's skull behind his left ear, passed through his brain, came to rest near the front of skull after fracturing both orbital plates.
Damn, blew out his face.
Lincoln slumped over in his chair and then fell backward. Rathbone turned to see Booth standing in gun smoke less than 4 feet behind Lincoln. Booth shouted a word that Rathbone thought sounded like freedom.
Rathbone jumped from his seat and struggled with Booth, who dropped the pistol and drew a dagger, with which he stabbed Rathbone in the left forearm.
Damn.
Rathbone again grabbed at Booth as he prepared to jump from the box to the stage, which was a 12-foot drop. Booth's ride and spur became entangled on the Treasury flag decorating the box, and he landed awkwardly on his left foot.
Ooh.
As he began crossing the stage, many in the audience thought he was part of the play.
Right. Damn. Booth, he then held his bloody knife over his head and yelled something to the audience. What is traditionally held that Booth shouted the Virginia state motto, Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. Either from the box or the stage, witness accounts, but they don't know which happened where. Most recalled hearing Sic semper tyrannis, but others, including Booth himself, said he yelled only Sic semper.
Thus always, maybe? Right.
Thus always. Some did not recall Booth saying anything in Latin. There's similar uncertainty about what Booth shouted next in English. Either the South is avenged, or revenge for the South, or the South shall be free. 2 witnesses remember Booth's words as, I've done it.
They did something. Immediately after Booth landed on the stage, Major Joseph B. Stewart climbed over the orchestra pit and footlights and pursued Booth across the stage. The screams of Mary Lincoln and Clara Harris and Rathbone's cries of stop that man prompted others to join the chase as pandemonium broke out.
Damn.
Booth exited the theater through a side door and on the way, stabbing orchestra leader William Withers Jr.
For what? He probably tried stopping him.
Maybe. As he leapt into the saddle of his getaway horse, Booth pushed away Joseph Burroughs, who had been holding the horse, striking Burroughs with the handle of his knife.
Damn. This dude he's got to go.
Get out of here.
Charles Leal, a young Union Army surgeon, pushed through the crowd to the door of the presidential box. Couldn't open it until Rathbone inside noticed that there was a wooden brace, so he removed it and let old Charles in. Charles, he found that Lincoln seated with his head leaning to his right as Mary held him and sobbed. His eyes were closed, and he was in profoundly comatose condition, while his breathing was intermittent and exceedingly stertorous. Thinking Lincoln had been stabbed, Charles, he shifted him to the floor. Meanwhile, another physician, another Charles Sabin Taft, he lifted into the box from the stage.
Jeez.
Damn, that lifted his ass. Must have been a little skinny guy.
Well, after Leal and bystander William Kent cut away Lincoln's collar while unbuttoning his coat and shirt and found no stab wound, Leal located the gunshot wound behind the left ear. You couldn't see the blood. He found the bullet too deep to be removed, but dislodged a blood clot, after which Lincoln's breathing improved.
Right.
He learned that regularly removing new clots maintained Lincoln's breathing. After giving Lincoln artificial respiration, Leo allowed actress Laura Keene to cradle the president's head in her lap. He pronounced the wound mortal.
Yeah, it's like, this is rough.
Let's get him to comfort at least.
All right. Leal, Taft, and another Dr. Albert King decided that Lincoln must be moved to the nearest house on 10th Street because a carriage ride to the White House was too dangerous. Carefully, 7 men picked up Lincoln and slowly carried him out of the theater, which was packed with an angry mob. After considering Peter Taudevil's Star Saloon next door, they concluded that they would take Lincoln to one of the houses across the way. It was raining as soldiers carried Lincoln into the street, where a man urged them toward the house of Taylor William Peterson. Peterson's first-floor bedroom, the exceptionally tall Lincoln was laid diagonally on a small bed. Damn.
After clearing everyone out of the room, including Mrs. Lincoln, the doctors cut away Lincoln's clothes but discovered no other wounds. Finding that Lincoln was cold, they applied hot water bottles and mustard plasters while covering him with blankets. Later, more physicians arrived. Surgeon General Joseph Barnes, Charles Henry Crane, Anderson Ruffin Abbott, and Robert K. Stone, who was Lincoln's personal physician.
Damn it. Damn, all agreed Lincoln could not survive. Barnes probed the wound, locating the bullet and some bone fragments. Throughout the night, as the hemorrhage continued, they removed blood clots to relieve pressure on the brain. And Leal, he held the comatose president's hand with a firm grip to let him know that he was in touch with his humanity and had a friend, he said. Lincoln's older son, Robert Todd Lincoln, he arrived at about 11 p.m. But 12-year-old Tad Lincoln, he was watching a play of Aladdin at Grover's Theater when he learned of his father's assassination. He did not get to go there. They kept his little boy away.
Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton arrived. Stanton insisted that the sobbing Mrs. Lincoln leave the sick room. Then for the rest of the night, he essentially ran the United States government from the house, including directing the hunt for Booth and the other conspirators.
All right.
Guards kept the public away, but numerous officials and physicians were admitted to pay their respects.
Son of a bitch.
Initially, Lincoln's features were calm and his breathing slow and steady. Later, one of his eyes became swollen and the right side of his face discolored. Monsell Bradhurst Field wrote in a letter to the New York Times that Lincoln then started breathing regularly, but with effort, and did not seem to be struggling or suffering.
Okay, he's just chilling. As he neared death, old Abe, his appearance became perfectly natural, except for the discoloration around his eyes. Shortly before 7 a.m., Mary, she was allowed to return to Lincoln's side. And, as Dixon reported, she again seated herself by the president, kissing him and calling him every endearing name. Lincoln, dead, 7:22 a.m., April 15th, 1865. Mary Lincoln was not present at this time. Oh, that sucks. In his last moments, Lincoln's face became calm and his breathing quieter. Field, he wrote, there was no apparent suffering, no convulsive action, no rattling of the throat, only a mere cessation of breathing.
Damn. According to Lincoln's secretary, John Hay, at the moment of Lincoln's death, a look of unspeakable peace came upon his worn features. The assembly knelt for a prayer, after which Stanton said either now he belongs to the ages or now he belongs to the angels.
That's the angels, probably.
On Lincoln's death, Vice President Johnson became the 17th President of the United States. The oath of office was administered to Johnson by Chief Justice Salmon Chase sometime between 10 and 11 a.m.
Hey, they got to do that shit quick, guys.
Right.
Booth assigned Lewis Powell to kill Secretary of State William Seward, as we said, on the night
this
of
was supposed to all happen at the same time.
Seward was at his home on Lafayette Square, confined to bed and recovering from injuries sustained on the 5th of April from being thrown from his carriage. Harold, he guided Powell to Seward's house. Powell carried an 1858 Whitney revolver, which is a large, heavy, and popular gun during the Civil War. And he also had a Bowie knife.
Bowie.
Yeah. William Bell, Seward's maitre d', answered the door when Powell knocked at about 10:10 p.m. As Booth made his way to the presidential box at Ford's Theater at this very time, Powell, he told Bell that he had medicine from Seward's physician and that his instructions were to personally show Seward how to take it. Overcoming Bell's skepticism, Powell made his way up to the stairs to Seward's third-floor bedroom. At the top of the staircase, he was stopped by Seward's son, Assistant Secretary of State Frederick Seward, to whom he repeated the medicine story. And Frederick, suspicious, said, "Nah, my dad's asleep. You can show him in the morning."
Hearing voices, Seward's daughter Fanny emerged from Seward's room and said, "Fred, father is awake now."
Oh, no.
Jeez. Thus revealing to Powell where Seward was. Powell turned as if to start downstairs, but suddenly turned again and drew his revolver. He aimed at Frederick's forehead and pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired.
Oh, no.
So he bludgeoned Frederick unconscious with it. Bell, yelling, "Murder! Murder!" ran outside for help.
Son of a bitch.
Damn, dude.
Damn. Fanny opened the door again. Powell shoved past her to Seward's bed. He stabbed at Seward's face and neck, slicing open his cheek. However, the splint, often mistakenly described as a neck brace, that was on Seward's neck had fitted at Seward's broken jaw, prevented the blade from penetrating his jugular.
Lucky son of a gun.
Seward eventually recovered, though the serious scars on his face. Seward's son Augustus and Sergeant George Robinson, a soldier assigned to Seward, they were alerted by Fanny's screams and received stab wounds in struggling with Powell. Oh, man.
As Augustus went for a pistol, Powell ran downstairs towards the door, where he encountered Emmerich Hansel, who was a State Department messenger. Powell stabbed Hansel in the back, then ran outside exclaiming, "I'm mad! I'm mad!" Screams from the house had frightened Harold, who ran off, leaving Powell to find his own way in an unfamiliar city.
Holy shit.
Jeez.
What a mess right there.
Well, there's that, huh?
Booth, he had assigned George Atzerodt to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. As we said, he was staying at the Kirkwood House in Washington. Atzerodt was to go to Johnson's room at 10:15 p.m. and shoot him dead. On the 14th of April, Atzerodt, he rented the room directly above Johnson's. The next day, he arrived there at the appointed time, and he carried a gun and a knife, went to the bar downstairs. he asked the bartender about Johnson's character and behavior. He eventually became very drunk, and he wandered off through the streets, tossing his knife away at some point. The bartender was like, "Oh, he's such a nice man, and he'd rather that the South would just let him be, let him be down there." And he's like, "Really?"
I could never see no man wishing harm on that guy. And he's like, shit.
Son of a bitch. He made his way to the Pennsylvania House Hotel by 2 a.m., where he obtained a room and he went to sleep. And he's like, fuck that.
He had to have heard about the assassination.
Probably not.
Drunk as shit.
Right.
Well, earlier in the day, though, Booth had stopped by the Kirkwood house and left a note for Johnson. "Don't wish to disturb you. Are you at home? J. Wilkes Booth."
Oh, wow.
One theory is that Booth was trying to find out whether Johnson was expected at the Kirkwood that night. Another holds that Booth, concerned that Atzerodt would fail to kill Johnson, intended the note to implicate Johnson in the conspiracy.
Okay. Wow. Abraham Lincoln was mourned in both the North and the South, and indeed around the whole world. Numerous foreign governments issued proclamations and declared periods of mourning on 15th April.
Word spread fast, huh? I guess telegraph.
Lincoln was praised in sermons on Easter Sunday, which fell on the day after his death. 18th of April, 1865, mourners lined up 7 deep for a mile to view Lincoln in his walnut casket in the White House's black draped East Room. Special trains brought thousands from other cities, some of whom slept on the Capitol's lawn. Hundreds of thousands watched the funeral procession on April 19th, and millions more lined the 1,700-mile route of the train, which took Lincoln's remains through New York to Springfield, Illinois, often passing trackside tributes in the form of bands, bonfires, and hymn singing. Oh,
Crazy.
My goodness.
Poet Walt Whitman composed "When Lilacs Last and the Dooryard Bloomed," "Oh Captain, My Captain," and 2 other poems to eulogize Lincoln.
Fantastic.
Ulysses S. Grant called Lincoln incontestably the greatest man I ever knew. You only met him twice.
Right.
Robert E. Lee expressed sadness. "I'm sad."
All right.
Southern-born Elizabeth Blair said that those of Southern-born sympathies know now that they have lost a friend willing and more powerful to protect and serve them than they can now ever hope to find again.
Because he was the only one that was really like, hey, we can.
Yeah. African-American orator Frederick Douglass called the assassination an unspeakable calamity. British Foreign Secretary Lord Russell, he called Lincoln's death a sad calamity.
Either way, it was a calamity.
Yep.
China's Chief Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Prince Gong, described himself as inexpressibly shocked and startled. Ecuadorian President Gabriel Garcia Moreno, he said, "Never should I have thought that the noble country of Washington would be humiliated by such a black and horrible crime. Nor should I have ever thought that Mr. Lincoln would come to such a horrible end after having served his country with such wisdom and glory under so critical circumstances."
Oh, the Ecuadorian guy, huh?
Look at him. The government of Liberia issued a proclamation calling Lincoln not only the ruler of his own people, but a father to millions of a race stricken and oppressed. Wow. The government of Haiti condemned the assassination as a horrid crime. Well, it was horrid.
And within a half hour of fleeing Ford's Theater, though, we'll go back to there, Booth crossed the Navy Yard Bridge into Maryland. A Union Army sentry named Silas Cobb questioned him about his late-night travel. Booth, he said he was going home to the nearby town of Charles. Although it was forbidden for civilians to cross the bridge after 9 p.m., the sentry let him through.
Forbidden.
I mean, he's John Wilkes Booth. Harold, he made it across the same bridge less than an hour later. I mean, he's Harold.
Right.
And he rendezvoused with Booth. After retrieving weapons and supplies previously stored at Surrattsville, Harold and Booth rode to the home of Samuel A. Mudd, who was a local doctor, who then splinted the leg that Booth had broken in his escape, and later made a pair of crutches for Booth.
Yeah.
After one day at Mudd's house, Booth and Harold, they hired a local man to guide them to Samuel Cox's house. Cox, in turn, took them to Thomas Jones, who was a Confederate sympathizer. He hid Booth and Harold in the Zacchaeus Swamp for 5 days until they could cross the Potomac.
Right.
Afternoon of April 24th, they arrived at the farm of Richard Garrett, who was a tobacco farmer in King George County, Virginia.
Oh.
Booth, he told Garrett he was a wounded Confederate soldier.
April 15th letter to Navy Surgeon General George Brainerd Todd from his brother tells of the rumors in Washington about Booth. "Today, all the city is in mourning, nearly every house being in black, and I have not seen a smile, no business, and a many strong man I have seen in tears. Some reports say Booth is a prisoner. Others say that he's made his escape. But from orders received here, I believe he is taken. and during the night will be put on a monitor for safekeeping, as a mob once raised now would have no end.
Yeah, then kill them. The hunt for conspirators quickly became the largest in U.S. history, involving thousands of federal troops and countless civilians.
Damn.
Edwin Stanton, he personally directed the operation, authorizing rewards of $50,000, which is about $1 million today for Booth, and $25,000 each for Harold and John Surratt.
Damn. That's $500,000.
Jeez. Booth and Harold were sleeping at Garrett's farm April 26 when soldiers from the 16th New York Cavalry arrived, surrounded the barn, and threatened to set fire to it. Harold surrendered, but Booth cried out, "I will not be taken alive." The soldiers, they set fire to the barn. Booth scrambled to the back door with a rifle and pistol.
Here we go. Sergeant Boston Corbett crept up behind the barn, shot Booth in the back of the head, about an inch below the spot where Booth shot Lincoln, severing his spinal cord.
Damn.
Booth was carried out onto the steps of the barn. Soldier poured water into his mouth, which he spat out, unable to swallow. Booth told the soldiers, "Tell my mother I died for my country." Unable to move his limbs, he asked the soldier to lift his hands before his face and whispered his last words as he gazed at them. "Useless. Useless." He died on the porch of Garrett Farm 3 hours later. Everybody thought that he got taken at the doctor's office, and he did not. Corbett was initially arrested for disobeying orders from Stanton that Booth be taken alive if possible, but was later released and was largely considered a hero by the media and the public. Of course, they wanted him alive. Then they were going to kill him.
They were going to hang him in public.
Right.
Obviously. Well, without Harold to guide him, Powell did not find his way back to the Surratt house until April 17th.
Damn.
He told detectives waiting there that he was a ditch digger hired by Mary, but she denied knowing him.
Oh, wow.
Both were then arrested. George Adzerat, on the other hand, he hid at his cousin's farm in Germantown, Maryland, which is about 25 miles northwest of Washington. He was arrested there April 20th. The remaining conspirators were arrested by month's end, except for John Surratt, who fled to Quebec, where Roman Catholic priests hid him.
Oh,
jeez.
Makes sense.
What? Well,
September, he boarded a ship to Liverpool, England, staying in the Catholic Church of the Holy Cross there.
what the fudge is going on with these Catholics?
Well, from there, he moved furtively through Europe until joining the Pontifical Zouaves in the Papal States. A friend from his school days recognized him there in early 1866 and alerted the United States government.
Damn.
Surratt,
That's a small world.
right. Surratt was arrested by the papal authorities, but managed to escape under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, Father Timothy let him out.
Damn right. He was finally captured by an agent of the United States in Egypt in November of 1866.
Scores of persons were arrested, including many associates of the conspirators, and anyone had even the slightest contact with Booth or Harold during their flight. Those included Louis Weichman, a boarder in Mrs. Surratt's house, Booth's brother Junius, in Cincinnati at the time, when Lincoln was assassinated, theater owner John Ford, James Pumphrey, from whom Booth hired his horse, John Lloyd, the innkeeper who rented Mrs. Surratt's Maryland Tavern, and gave Booth and Harold weapons and supplies the night of the 14th.
Ooh.
Plus Samuel Cox and Thomas Jones, who helped Booth and Harold cross the Potomac. All were eventually released except Samuel Arnold, George Adzerat, David Harold, Samuel Mudd, Michael O'Laughlin, Lewis Powell, Edmund Spangler. He was a theater stagehand who had given Booth's horse to the Burroughs to hold.
Damn.
And Mary Surratt.
Wow. The accused were tried by a military tribunal ordered by Johnson, who had succeeded to the presidency on Lincoln's death. Major General David Hunter, he was presiding. Major General Lew Wallace. Brigadier General Robert Sanford Forrest. Brigadier General Robert Sanford Foster. Brevet Major General Thomas Maley Harris. Brigadier General L.B.N. Howe. Brigadier General August Kautz. Colonel James Eakin. Colonel Charles Tompkins. Lieutenant Colonel David Ramsey Clenenden. They all were there.
Prosecution was led by U.S. Army Judge Advocate General Joseph Holt, assisted by Congressman John A. Bingham and Major Henry Lawrence Burnett. Lew Wallace was the only lawyer on the tribunal. The use of a military tribunal provoked criticism from the former Attorney General Edward Bates and the Secretary of Navy Gideon Welles,
Damn right.
who believed that a civil court should have presided.
No.
But Attorney General James Speed pointed to the military nature of the conspiracy and the facts that the defendants acted as enemy combatants,
Right.
and that martial law was in force at the time in the District of Columbia.
Damn right.
In 1866, in Ex parte Milligan, the United States Supreme Court banned the use of military tribunals in places where civil courts were operational.
No.
They said, we can't have this again.
Only a simple majority of the tribunal members was required for a guilty verdict, a 2/3 for a death sentence. there was no route for appeal other than to President Johnson.
And that shit ain't happening.
7 week
Like, you guys tried to kill me, dude.
Right. 7 week trial included testimony of 366 witnesses.
Don't know why it took 7 weeks.
All of the defendants were found guilty on June 30th. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, George Azerodt were sentenced to death by hanging. Samuel Mudd, Sammy Arnold, Michael O'Laughlin were sentenced to life in prison.
Why did Azerodt get sentenced to death by hanging and even do anything?
That's crazy.
Just got drunk.
Edmund Spangler, sentenced 6 years after sentencing Mary Surratt to hang. 5 members of the tribunal signed a letter recommending clemency for her, but Johnson did not stop the execution. He later claimed he never saw the letter.
Yeah, right.
Mary Surratt, Powell, Harold, Azerodt hanged at the Old Arsenal Penitentiary. Mary Surratt was the first woman executed by the United States government ever. O'Laughlin died in prison in 1867. Mudd, Arnold, Spangler were pardoned in February of 1869 by Johnson.
And it's like baited on whether Mudd knew what was going on or not.
Right. He's like, dude, Mudd's like, man, I'm just treating a broken leg, which was not even mentioned in the whole story there.
Yes, it did. So he provided him a cast and made crutches for him.
Oh, didn't hear that.
Oh. Spangler, who died in 1875, always insisted his sole connection to the plot was that Booth asked him to hold his horse.
All right.
John Surratt stood trial in a civil court in Washington in 1867. 4 residents of Elmira, New York, claimed they had seen him there between April 13th and 15th. 15 others testified they either saw him or someone who resembled him in Washington on the same day of the assassination.
Wow.
The jury could not reach a verdict, and John Surratt was released.
I mean, what are you going to do, right? Lincoln's redefinition of Republican values has been stressed by historians such as John Patrick Diggins, Harry V. Jaffa, Vernon Burton, Eric Foner, and Herman J. Bells. Lincoln called the Declaration of Independence, which emphasized freedom and equality for all, the sheet anchor of republicanism beginning in the 1850s. He did this at the time when the Constitution, which tolerated slavery, was the focus of most political discourse. Dickens notes, Lincoln presented Americans a theory of history that offers a profound contribution to the theory and destiny of republicanism itself. He did that in 1860 Cooper Union speech. Instead of focusing on the legality of an argument, he focused on the moral base of republicanism.
His position on the war, oh, by the way, guys, we're in his legacy as a president right now. His position on war was founded on a legal argument regarding the Constitution as essentially a contract among the states, and all parties must agree to pull out of the contract.
Right.
Furthermore, it was a national duty to ensure the Republic stands in every state. Many soldiers and religious leaders from the North, though, they felt the fight for liberty and freedom of slaves was ordained by their moral and religious beliefs.
Right. As a Whig activist, Lincoln was a spokesman for business interests, favoring high tariffs, banks, infrastructure improvements, and railroads, in opposition to the Jacksonian Democrats. Lincoln, he shared the sympathies that the Jacksonians professed for the common man, but he disagreed with the Jacksonian view that the government should be divorced from economic enterprise. Well, nevertheless, Lincoln admired Andrew Jackson's steeliness as well as his patriotism.
Andrew Jackson was a bad man.
He was a bad hombre.
According to historian Sean Willentz, just as the Republican Party of the 1850s absorbed certain elements of Jacksonianism, so Lincoln, whose Whiggery had always been more egalitarian than that of the other Whigs, he found himself absorbing some of them as well.
What are you going to do?
Some of the Jacksonian spirit resided inside the Lincoln White House.
Damn right it did.
William C. Harris, he found that Lincoln's reverence for the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, the laws under it, and the preservation of the Republic and its institutions strengthened his conservatism.
I mean, it should. James G. Randall emphasizes his tolerance and moderation in his preference for orderly progress, his distrust of dangerous agitation, and his reluctance towards ill-digested schemes of reform. Randall concludes that he was a conservative in his complete avoidance of that type of so-called radicalism which involved abuse of the South, hatred for the slaveholder, thirst for vengeance, partisan plotting, and ungenerous demands that the Southern institutions be transformed overnight by outsiders.
In Lincoln's first inaugural address, he explored the nature of democracy. He denounced secession as anarchy, and he explained that the majority rule had to be balanced by constitutional restraint. He said, a majority held in restraint by constitutional checks and limitations, and always changing easily with deliberate changes of popular opinions and sentiments, is the only true sovereign of a free people.
Very true, man. I mean, the Founding Fathers said it best.
The successful reunification of the states had consequences for how people viewed the country. The term the United States has historically been used sometimes in the plural as these United States, and other times in the singular. Civil War was a significant force in the eventual dominance of the singular usage by the end of the 19th century. Yeah. We are one, baby.
Right. Union. In surveys of U.S. scholars ranking presidents conducted since 1948, top 3 presidents are generally Abe, George, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I don't know why Roosevelt's constantly ranked so high, to be honest with you, but
he only was president for 35 years.
Oh, exactly my point.
Although the order varies, but it's usually Lincoln and Washington. Actually, I would have to put Washington number 1.
Well, the next 2 you're about to say are generally top 5 in some order.
Right. Between 1999 and 2011, Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan were the top-ranked presidents in 8 public opinion surveys. I don't even know why JFK was a great president. What did he do?
He got
a couple of things
stuff done.
Right.
He's the one that ignited the space shit.
Yeah, he wanted to end the Federal Reserve, just didn't get a chance.
Well, they ended him.
All right. 2004 study found that scholars in the fields of history and politics ranked Lincoln number 1, while legal scholars placed him second after George Washington. I mean, George Washington has to be number 1. I'm sorry, guys.
All right. Lincoln's assassination left him a national martyr, of course. He was viewed by abolitionists as a champion of human liberty.
Okay.
Republicans linked Lincoln's name to their party. Many, though not all, in the South considered Lincoln as a man of outstanding ability.
They did.
Historians have said he was a classical liberal in the 19th century sense. Historian Alan Guelzo, he states that Lincoln was a classical liberal Democrat, an enemy of artificial hierarchy, a friend to trade and business as ennobling and enabling, and an American counterpart to Mill, Cobden, and Bright.
Okay.
Whose portrait Lincoln hung in his White House office.
Sociologist Barry Schwartz argues that Lincoln's American reputation grew slowly from the late 19th century until the Progressive Era, which is 1900s to 1920s. He emerged as one of America's most venerated heroes, even among white Southerners. The high point came in 1922 with the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Union nationalism, as envisioned by Lincoln, helped lead America to be the nationalism of Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Roosevelt. In the New Deal era, liberals honored Lincoln not so much as a self-made man or the Great War president, but they honored him as the advocate of the common man, who they claimed would have supported the welfare state, which I don't think he would have.
I think he would have.
I don't know about that.
Well, Schwartz, the guy, he argues that in 1930s and 40s, the memory of Abraham Lincoln was practically sacred and provided the nation with a moral symbol inspiring and guiding American life.
Right.
During the Great Depression, he argues, Lincoln served as a means for seeing the world's disappointments, for making its sufferings not so much explicable as meaningful. FDR, preparing for a war, he used the words of the Civil War president to clarify the threat posed by Germany and Japan. Americans asked, what would Lincoln do?
WWLD, baby. However, Schwartz also finds that since World War II, Lincoln's symbolic power has lost relevance, and this fading hero is symptomatic of fading confidence in national greatness. He went on to suggest that postmodernism and multiculturalism have diluted greatness as a concept. Well, fucking racist.
Right.
In the Cold War years, Lincoln's image shifted to a symbol of freedom, who brought hope to those oppressed by communist regimes. He had long been known as the great emancipator, but by the late 60s, some African-American intellectuals, led by Lerone Bennett Jr., denied that Lincoln even deserved that title.
Well, he got attention. He got wide attention when he called Lincoln a white supremacist in 1968. Anything to get your race narrative out there. He noted Lincoln used ethnic slurs and told jokes that ridiculed blacks. Sure he did.
I'm sure that they all did.
Bennett argued that Lincoln opposed social equality and proposed that freed slaves voluntarily move to another country. He did. Remember, they did have a place moved. Then they were
in Mexico.
No, it was South America.
Right.
They were gonna literally take over this country for them. Yeah, well,
which is true.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? The emphasis shifted. You know, that's why. What is it in Africa? It's Liberia or Liberia,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Liberia. That was created by America for freed slaves and shit. Project American Colonization. Yeah, they wanted to go black people to go back better freedom and prosperity in Africa than in the United States. Yeah, okay.
Bring back, huh?
Okay. The emphasis shifted away from Lincoln the Emancipator to an argument that blacks had freed themselves from slavery, or at least were responsible for pressuring the government to emancipate them.
I don't think either one of those.
No.
Defenders of Lincoln retorted that he was a moral visionary who deftly advanced the abolitionist cause as fast as politically possible. He did do it fast as politically possible.
Do know, though, that he didn't want to be known as an abolitionist.
Not at all.
Until it suited him, actually.
Right. Brian Dirk stated that few Civil War scholars take Bennett or Thomas DiLorenzo seriously, pointing to their narrow political agendas and faulty research. By the 1970s, Lincoln had become a hero again to the political conservatives. Apart from neo-Confederates such as Mel Bradford, who denounced his treatment of the white South for his intense nationalism, his support for business, his insistence on stopping the spread of slavery, his acting on Lockean and Burkean principles on behalf of both liberty and tradition, and his devotion to the principles of the Founding Fathers.
Well, Lincoln became a favorite of liberal intellectuals across the world. Barry Schwartz wrote in 2009 that Lincoln's image suffered erosion, fade in prestige, benign ridicule in the late 20th century. By contrast, David Herbert Donald opined in his 1996 biography that Lincoln was distinctly endowed with the personality trait of negative capability, defined by the poet John Keats and attributed to extraordinary leaders who were capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason.
Okay. Whatever. 21st century saw that President Barack Obama named Lincoln as his favorite president of all time. And he insisted on using the Lincoln Bible for his inaugural ceremonies.
Is it a real Lincoln Bible that Lincoln had? Yeah. Oh, really?
Lincoln has often been portrayed by Hollywood, almost always in a flattering light. Lincoln has also been admired by political figures outside the U.S., including German political theorist Karl Marx.
Theorist?
Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi. Former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Liberian, yes.
Yeah. What did I say?
Liberian.
Leader of the Italian or Risorgimento, Giuseppe Garibaldi. It's crazy. Lincoln's portrait appears on two denominations of United States currency, the penny and the $5 bill. He appears on postage stamps across the whole world.
Oh.
While he usually portrayed bearded, he did not even grow a beard until 1860 at the suggestion of 11-year-old Grace Bettel. He was the first of 5 presidents to do so. He has been memorialized in many towns, many cities, and many counties by his name.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Including the capital of Nebraska.
Yes.
Lincoln, Nebraska. The United States Navy Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln is named after Lincoln, obviously. The second Navy ship to bear his name.
They just announced a USS Bill Clinton and a USS George W. Bush.
Really?
Yeah. The Lincoln Memorial is one of the most visited monuments in the nation's capital, of course. It is one of the most visited National Park Service sites in the country.
Oh.
Ford's Theater, among the most visited sites in Washington, D.C., is across the street from the Peterson House, where Lincoln died.
Yep.
Memorials in Springfield, Illinois include the Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum.
Is the Lincoln House, the Peterson House exactly the way it looked?
Yeah.
Nice.
Lincoln's home, which there's a nice little thing on YouTube of a guy exploring it. Pretty good. There was a outhouse back then.
Right.
Lincoln, there was one for his son, his wife. The same outhouse, but like a hole.
Right.
And his was like super tall. You could barely get on it because he's so tall, obviously.
Right.
And obviously his tomb in Illinois is most visited as well.
Fantastic.
A portrait carving of Lincoln appears with those of 3 other presidents on Mount Rushmore, yes.
An influential statue of Lincoln stands in Lincoln Park in Chicago.
And it starts with 1.
With recastings given as diplomatic gifts to the Parliament Square in London, the Parque Lincoln in Mexico City.
Well, cool.
2019, Congress officially dedicated room H226 in the United States Capitol to Abraham Lincoln. The room is located off the National Statuary Hall and served as the post office of the House, while then Representative Abraham Lincoln served in Congress from 1847 to 1849. Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic.
Look at that.
Here we go, guys. That's the end of Lincoln's story. Literally 6 hours probably worth we just did of Lincoln, 5.5. Yeah, cool. That's a story, and
We're sticking to it.
we're sticking to it because I don't think it's going to change.
It might.
You never know. Revisionist. Yeah, that's it for this series. Kicks off Battles Behind the Battles. Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles.
Got some good shit coming up, too.
Next week, kicking it off on the Confederate side with the other president.
Oh, jeez. This guy's going to have a short story.
Jefferson Davis. It's going to be one episode for sure. But Lincoln, maybe Grant. Well, probably the only one that has more than one episode, I would assume.
Robert E. Lee will probably have a decent one.
Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, next president, the other president, Jefferson Davis next, and then we'll probably do Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant after that. And then we'll work our way to somebody else.
Well, we'll probably throw in between those like an event or something.
Maybe whatever this one was. Maybe the Trent Affair.
Something like that.
Or the...
It's all kinds of stuff.
Or we can look at the Dahlgren Papers, which was the plan to assassinate Jefferson Davis and a bunch of Confederate guys. So early on in the war. So yeah, either or. Next week's Jefferson Davis. So keep it right here, and we'll be back for that. Subscribe, share with your friends, all that good stuff. See you next week on Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles. We are the Mother Michiganders.
Dang.